In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. On today's episode, we will be talking about reasoning toward God, the relationship that human reason plays toward understanding the revelation of God. And I use human reasoning there in a positive sense. I know, and sometimes there's this baggage of human reasoning in the negative sense. But we're going to get into that perhaps a little bit today with our guest. But before we do so, just a couple things to note here. You may notice that I'm wearing an Oakland Athletics hat, and I am a devoted Chicago Cubs fan. All my Cubs hats happen to be dirty right now. And so the Athletics are my favorite AL team. And so I read the book Moneyball back when I was in high school. Of course, they made a movie with Brad Pitt, which I actually watch annually in the off season. So it helps keep stem the tide. What's the term there, Chris? I forget.
Pass the time, get a fix.
No, the tide. It's a shipping. Our guest already probably is waiting for him to correct me. I forget what the thing is, but yeah, it helps make it manageable the off season when there's no baseball games going on. Classic American sport, truly a team game. It's great. It's awesome. All right. I am also pleased to announce on today's program, we have secured officially a venue for the annual Defenders Conference. It will be at Christ Church of Oak Brook, where we held the event a few years ago. But it took a little bit longer securing the venue this time. I think they've implemented some more protocols, which are good, but it just took quite a bit longer to make it secure. But now it's all official. And so on October 18 and 19, we're going to be talking about gospel differences. And like last year's conference, we're going to be bringing in different perspectives on some issue. And so everyone's talking about the same thing, as I joke about. But fascinating. Right now, we have 3 confirmed speakers, Dr. Mike Lacona, Dr. Craig Keener, and Dr. Rob Bowman. And so it's going to be fascinating having them engage one another with their ideas. The panel discussion, I'm sure we will air as a Veracity Hill episode, as we've done in the past. Please come to Chicago, make it a long weekend, Friday night, Saturday, go see the city on Sunday. Great opportunity. We had folks from all sorts of different states last year, 7 or 8 different states come in throughout the country, Virginia, Oklahoma. We had some high school teachers from Kentucky come on up, which was great. I hope they can join us again this year. Should be a lot of fun at Christ Church of Oak Brook. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to thedefendersconference.com. And I'll actually be updating some info, I think, this next week on that. But at any rate, you can registration is live. We've already had a few folks register. We've got, about 2.5 months out here. So we'll start to do more promotion for that. Okay, so let's jump into the topic of our show today, reasoning toward God. And our guest today is an analytic philosopher, and maybe he can tell us what analytic philosophy is all about. And when I think of an analytical philosopher, I think, man, someone who's super sharp, who thinks very carefully about some very minute things like, what is blackness of this little tablet case, and what is the case? And I think, how do we know that there is a case? These sorts of questions. So joining us on our program now is Dr. Joshua Rasmussen, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at Azusa Pacific University. Josh, thank you for joining us on our program today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
All right. Analytic philosophy, what is that?
Well, I think of it as just what you just said, is we're trying to get clear. We're trying to use the tools of logic and reason to organize our thoughts so we can get to the truth. And sometimes people characterize this in contrast with a kind of continental philosophy. I like to think of us as kind of a big team of philosophers. We have different approaches, different tendencies, but my tendency is towards precision, clarity. I often echo my advisor, Peter Vanenwagen's question, what do you mean by that? And I want a definition. So that's my approach. I want to get clear about things.
Nice. When you Van Inwagen says, "What do you mean by that?" I like a question that Alvin Plantinga frequently posed as an objection. He said, "Well, why should we think that?"
Yeah, right. Well, I remember asking Peter one time, well, what do you mean by mean? I just asked him that. And he had just this look on his face, his eyes wide, and he just said, I don't know. Maybe I should know. I teased him about that because he didn't have an answer. But he was being very honest, right? Because it's maybe one of his basic terms.
Yes. Maybe we should say something like the intention that one has to convey or in their conveying of an idea to someone else. That's what meaning is.
Yeah. Well, there's different theories of meaning, right? Like
Of
there's
course,
the
of course there are.
the chameleon theory, yeah, anyway.
Okay, so you've got this recent book here, How Reason Can Lead to God, A Philosopher's Bridge to Faith, by IVP. And when I first got it, I started reading this way. And so I was like, oh, wait, no, it's the other way. It's a staircase.
I think it means something about you. So I think about like a third of people read it from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure out what that means. It's like a personality test.
Right.
What do you think that means?
And then I figured out it was a staircase.
Like maybe what it means is you care more about the top word than the bottom word. The top word is God. The bottom word is reason. So maybe the target audience, they'll go first to the bottom. They care about reason.
Yeah, could be.
I don't know.
Maybe. But now, so it looks like a staircase to me. It could be one of those Rorschach things, But one of the other analogies that you've used to convey your mission here is building a bridge. And so that's when I was creating the promo image for our episode, I saw images of big, long bridges. And maybe for some people, getting to God and thinking about God as a big, long bridge like the Golden Gate or the Brooklyn Bridge. But for others, it can be a very small bridge. And so that's the image. I wanted to find a small bridge because for me, I think it's quite simple.
I have to tell you, Kurt, I think the easiest way to know God is with one step, by inner awareness of Him. That's the easiest way, or at least, actually, let me correct that. That might be the hardest way, but it's also the fewest number of steps.
Right. Yeah. So I take it. Are you?
Yeah, because for me, that was not my path to God. I didn't find a one step. I didn't find Him within, or whatever I found within. I couldn't trust that was God. So I needed more steps.
Right, and that's something I do want to talk about, maybe a little bit later, about methodology. So I'll make a note here to talk about that perhaps in the second half of the program today. We had a little exchange on Facebook about that, and I know I've got some followers that are interested in method. With many books, in philosophy of religion, there's a lot of material out there. So what contribution do you think you're making here with a book sort of leading folks step by step to? Yeah,
I think there's a couple things. I mean, first, I have my younger self as one of the targets in the audience, somebody who doesn't believe in God, who has made a choice to follow reason wherever it will lead. And what I've noticed is that a lot of books that will sort of reach people with a kind of an argument for God, it tends to almost have this flavor of, you need to believe in God or we think you're irrational. Whereas my approach in this book is to honor the skeptic, because I think the skeptic has some treasures and some valuable insights. And I know when I was a skeptic, right? I mean, I valued truth, I valued reason. And so I wanted to show a pathway that would reach people without condemning people. And I feel like that's kind of missing. So that's that. And the other thing too is I really wanted to make every step completely seeable through reason so that you could find your way all the way to the end and have a complete picture of the nature of God. So if you already believe in God, it shows how reason can reveal the nature of God. If you don't believe in God, it gives you a fresh inquiry, because I don't even use the word God. I use the word foundation. And so all the way at the end, when we've uncovered the attributes of the foundation revealed by reason, I say, well, we could use the word God to describe what reason has revealed. So it's not a prepackaged worldview that I'm trying to rationalize. I think that's one of the worries people have. It's a legitimate worry. You're just starting with your Christianity, and then you're trying to use reason to make yourself feel secure, feel good. Reason's on your side. It's just not like that.
Right.
That's not my goal.
And you're also not trying to say this is what someone has to believe in order to be rational about their faith either.
Yes. Wisdom flows through the pillars of love and liberty. And liberty, it calls out in the streets. It doesn't shove itself through the windows. Because what I've noticed is that whatever can be seen can be blocked from sight. And I mean anything. Even the basic principles of logic, even mathematics, there are philosophers who have arguments for thinking that it's all false, and they've got their reasons, right? And so what I want to suggest is that you don't have to believe anything. I'm just letting you follow the steps, see where it leads you.
Yeah. So it's not that folks have to believe, say, this way or that way, but what you're saying is here's available evidence, here's a pathway that you could take that will get you there. And one of the things I liked in right at the start of the preface, you talked about your target audience. It's always a good thing to have in mind. You say here, I write for a specific sort of person. You value reason, science, and independent thinking. You question beliefs propped up by faith without sufficient evidence. Maybe you would like your life to have a deeper purpose, but you cannot believe something based on a mere wish. Whether you are a student, an academic, or just a curious person, you want one thing, the truth. If you can relate, this book is for you. And so I really appreciated that. Right at the outset, you say, and by implication, maybe this book is not for some people. Maybe.
Right. It isn't for people who are looking for a tribe to trust in or looking for reinforcements. It's really just not. It really is it's appealing to the independent thinker. Like, you want to see it for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it bugs you if you read something and people with authority say something and you actually just don't see it for yourself. It's like you're not settled. You want to see it. Even if it's like a mathematical proof and all the mathematicians think that this proof is sound. It's like you actually want to work through the proof to see it for yourself, because otherwise you're just not really sure.
Yeah.
Or maybe you are sure in some way, but you're not sure inside. You didn't see it for yourself. So you're right. It's not really meant for everybody. I mean, it is really meant for the independent thinker who wants to see things for themselves.
All right, so let's call me an independent thinker. Here, let me reverse my hat. So now I'm going to put on a different... Boy, I've done some funny things with hats over the years, haven't I, Chris? Remember that one time we had folks... the scarf. I wore a scarf once, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another time.
Was for the Watts of Love, wasn't it?
Yeah, Watts of Love. Yep. And then what was the one hat thing I had? No, that was Watts of Love. The scarf was the school choice program, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, backwards hat here. This is like Michael Scott from The Office. No, backwards hat. So I'm a skeptic, all right? Call me Kurt the Skeptic, Josh. And yeah, I'm open to God's existence, but we can't really know.
Kurt, can we maybe call you Doubting Thomas?
I'm not sure why you'd call me that, Chris. Many people don't know this. Kurt's actually my middle name, so Thomas is my first name. So that's why you want to call me Doubting Thomas, all right? So call me Doubting Tom, okay, Josh? So my name's Doubting Tom, and I'm open to God's existence, but presently there's no evidence, and maybe we can't really know at all. What would be the first step you would take someone or encourage them to take that first step on the bridge that you're building here?
Okay, yeah. So if I'm in conversation with somebody one-on-one, I want to start by building rapport, seeing what they believe, being quick to listen, slow to speak sort of thing. So I'm going to ask questions. I want to see, what do you think is true? Do you think that you can know anything? Do you think that you exist, right? So I want to start there. Now, as far as the Bridge of Reason, I've laid out these steps so that it's a sort of universal project that you can sort of find out. You can locate somebody on the bridge, and then you can move from there. So the first step on the bridge is existence. Okay. So does anything exist? And we can give an argument for that, right? So like, if you think that nothing exists, then your thought exists. Or if you doubt all existence, or if you think everything's an illusion, well, then there is the illusion, right? If you're in the Matrix, then there are machines that exist, right? So that's the beginning point. Now, you might think, okay, that's so obvious, that's trivial.
Common sense, realism, of course I exist.
I have to tell you, Kurt, okay, people confuse the trivial for the insignificant. And the easy to see doesn't mean it's thereby not significant. And one of the things that's very significant is the fact that there is anything. I mean, we can imagine a reality in which there's just nothing, and that would be simpler, right? I mean, that seems like a cleaner way for things to be, for there to not be anything, right? And yet there is something, and that's deeply significant. Part of the point of the Bridge of Reason is to unpack the significance of the existence of something. And let me just add here, reason itself is significant. You mentioned human reason. I would even question whether there is any such thing as human reason.
It
so
just is reason.
There's reason, right? So like if an angel, hypothetically, if there were an angel and it thought that 2 + 2 = 4, and I think that 2 + 2 = 4, is the angel reasoning in an angel way and am I reasoning in a human way? Or is it rather that you've got humans, you've got angels, you've got different beings that are capable of doing this very special thing called following the lines of reason? And the lines of reason are not just stuck in your own head. This is one of the discoveries that come later in the book, where you discover what is reason itself. See, one of the things I want to communicate in this book is that reason is a very special thing. And many people who are skeptical of God, they've come to see the value of reason. And they've come to follow the tracks or seek to follow the tracks of reason. But what is reason? What is the nature of reason? Why is it that the law of non-contradiction, that whatever, nothing can be both true and not true at the same time? Why is it that that law doesn't change on Tuesdays? They're false. And then on Wednesdays, it's true again, right? Or why is it that that law holds, like you can take a logic exam and every day of the week, that law is true. And it doesn't depend on your thinking about it. Like you could literally make mistakes on your logic exam. So there it looks like there's a kind of permanence to logic. There's a permanence to this thing I'm calling reason. There's your reasoning. You're trying to see the light of reason. And then there's reason itself. And what is that? And so this is another example of something that's so familiar, but when you actually think about it, you discover, okay, existence and reason are very significant kinds of things. And so that's where I'm going to start. Okay, so you're the skeptic. So do you agree that something exists?
Yeah, so I'm not the skeptic right now. The hat is forward facing. So let me say this. One of the things that I liked that you said was that even the skeptic uses reasoning. So when folks say object to Christian theism, let's say, well, we've got the conference in October. There are differences in the Gospels. Some think those differences are sufficient to warrant rejecting their historical reliability. Let's say there are contradictions or whatever, hypothetically. They're using their reasoning to guide them along to a conclusion, right? They're using a type of argument, maybe an abductive argument, argument to the best explanation, which basically then they come to the conclusion, the Gospels are historically unreliable, and therefore I don't have to bend my knee to Jesus as Lord and Savior. So even the skeptic is using reasoning, wherever reasoning comes from. We haven't gotten there yet, perhaps, but it does seem that it's a tool that is true regardless of if it's Tuesday or not. And so this seems like a good first step. Okay, so back to skeptical.
And so now you're a skeptic, and I just want to affirm something that you're doing good, which is that you're seeking to follow the lines of reason, and that this is something that is beautiful. And I'm not just saying this to flatter you or whatever. Like,
thanks. I do work on my beard. That's
you're looking good. I actually think that there's a way in which people who are really doing their best to follow the light of reason within, they're doing something that is pleasing to God. Now I'm getting ahead, to make that argument, but they're doing something that is actually very beautiful and very good. And that if you believe that what you're doing is pleasing to God, if you use that word God, that by itself doesn't automatically make you closer to God. So what I'm trying to say is that actually following the aspects of the nature of the foundation, following the lines of reason, following the light of goodness that you see is good.
Yeah.
It is good. And if you say that you believe in God and you don't follow the lines in the nature of God, you're farther from God than the atheist who doesn't call it God, but is actually following something within God. And I'm emphasizing this because the argument, the bridge of reason, it's a bridge, it's an argument, but it's a style of presentation, and it's a style that highlights what the skeptic is doing good. And I build from what they're doing good all the way to the result. It's a way of saying, here's the unknown God that you've actually been groping towards, but I'm just shining a light on what this really is and
Sure.
how awesome it is.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't know about all that last part there, but we've got existence, we've got reason. I'm willing to grant that. That doesn't get us to God, though.
Okay, so here's a puzzle, okay? So we can break up the argument. I'm going to simplify the whole bridge. We're going to put it into two parts. So this first part is unlocked by a puzzle. So here's the puzzle. We start by realizing that there's nothing, so something exists, but there's nothing outside of all of existence in total that could have produced it. So if you think of the total show as like one big blob, okay, the total show is just all of existence, it's one big blob. There's nothing outside of existence, because if there was something outside of existence, then it would exist.
It would be existence, right?
Yes. So therefore, what we see is that the whole show is not caused by anything beyond it, okay? But that leads to a puzzle, because the things we ordinarily experience, like our hands, particles, all these different things, come from prior states. So if things normally come from prior states and we don't have any example in our experience of things coming from nothing, how could there be some reality, namely the whole reality, that in fact exists without anything beyond itself? What do you think? What makes for the difference between the uncaused whole and the caused parts? Any ideas there?
Well, the universe could be eternal.
Yeah, so it's eternal. Okay, so imagine you've got this eternal lizard. Okay, and somebody wants to know, how is it that there exists this eternal lizard? Part of the problem is to understand how there could be anything that is eternal. Now, let's say the universe is eternal, okay? The whole point of the first part of the argument is to actually to get to the conclusion that there is something eternal. So if you propose that there's something eternal, that explains how it could be uncaused. We've finished the first stage of the argument. So we can celebrate this conclusion. There's something eternal. It exists in a special way. It's unlike my hand that had a beginning. And so that's good, right? So then maybe you want to know, okay, well, I think the universe is God, right?
Well, maybe I can backtrack. Maybe since I can see this isn't going the direction Doubting Tom wants it to go, maybe we could say, well, the universe had a beginning, but we just don't know what caused the beginning.
Yes, intellectual humility. That's beautiful. Yes. We should be humble, okay? So there's a philosopher, his name is Richard Taylor. He tells this story of coming into a forest and finding a sphere. Okay, so now let's imagine that you and I, we come to this forest and we find a sphere, and let's say it's purple. All right? Now, here's an idea. This sphere came into being from nothing. Okay? Do you think that's the most plausible explanation of the sphere? Of the possibilities. What do you think? I mean,
we could say it's a cosmic accident.
Yeah. But anyway, say you have no idea where it came from, right? Yeah. But do you think the best explanation of its existence is no explanation? Other things being equal.
I think maybe we just have to take the line that we don't know how it came about.
Okay, so fair enough. It came from something, but we don't know how it came about. So it still came from something. Okay, so this is just another way of taking us to stage 2. So stage 1 gets you to something that is uncaused. It, let's say, caused the universe. We don't know how the universe came about. We don't know the nature of its cause. So now we have to use the light of reason to investigate what could the nature of the cause be. So what I'm doing here is I'm just separating the argument, because I think what happens is people will focus everything on one step, and they'll say, well, if you can't get to God in one step, then the whole argument falls apart. And actually, it's the beauty of the argument that it breaks it apart into different steps so that we can carefully look at one step at a time. So the first step is that something exists, then you have the puzzle of existence, and then you try to solve that puzzle of existence, and that's going to take you to a special kind of thing that exists in a robust way. It doesn't exist because of other things. Instead, it exists in a foundational way. And this accounts for how there could be a reality. Because remember, the mystery is, how can there be anything rather than just nothing? Now, if there's something that's foundational and it exists in a robust way, it doesn't depend on other things. As you're suggesting, maybe the universe is like that, or maybe it's in an unknown cause that's like that. Fair enough. That's in stage 2 to investigate its nature. But there's got to be something foundational. Any questions about that first stage?
No, I think stage 1 looks good, but I don't think it gets us to God, much less the Christian God.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. Right. So that first stage, in fact, we can celebrate our unity here, right? That together as truth seekers, we've discovered something by the light of reason, that there is something, and it didn't come from something that doesn't exist. Instead, it came from something that ultimately is foundational. So now we can look, okay, what's the nature of this foundational thing? And here I say that there are two general approaches. One approach is to look at the kinds of effects that exist, and then you can tease back the nature of the cause from looking at the effects. Okay, so minds exist, consciousness exists, thinking exists, reasoning exists. Okay, and so each one of those effects actually opens up an argument that can tell us something about the nature of the cause. The cause somehow has the resources to be a foundation for those things. Okay, I haven't gone through those paths right now, but I'm just pointing to these paths that we could go down.
Sure.
And then
we're at a crossroads.
Yes. So we're at this road and we see these different paths that we could explore together. And then the other kind of path is one that looks directly at the cause and uses conceptual analysis and asks, how could this thing be foundational? What could separate it from my fingers? You know, you say, well, it's eternal. Okay, well, how could it be eternal? Could a lizard be eternal, for example? What kind of a thing could be eternal? What explains its eternality? And so let me just ask you, you know, the skeptic, which of these paths seems kind of most interesting to explore? A pathway from effects or a pathway from conceptual analysis of the cause? Where do you want to
go? Let's do the first one.
The first one? Okay, so so from effects. Okay, so let's do reasoning. Okay, so reasoning.
All right.
So first we have to establish that there is reasoning. So I always like to sort of play in your court. So let me just ask you, you know, is it part of your ontology that there are beings who can reason, that there is reasoning?
I think Doubting Tom would have to say yes. Yes, there are.
Well, he wouldn't have to. He's not forced to. He could doubt that, right?
Well, I think, but he would say, based on observation, you know, self-evident truths. You know, you're a reasoning thing. I'm a reasoning thing. There are reasoning.
I have to play Doubting Thomas here. You're too much of a believer. You're too quick. So, so there are philosophers. They sort of see where this is going, and they will stop it right here. So these are called eliminativist materialists. So they will eliminate thinking, they'll eliminate consciousness, they'll eliminate persons. I've even met two different philosophers in the flesh who express skepticism of people for various reasons.
Huh.
And they believed in observations, but they believed in observations through the five senses, your eyes, your ears, right? You can taste it. But can you taste reasoning? You know, what color is reasoning? You know, like if you think that 2 + 2 = 4, you might write that on a board and you can touch the chalk.
Yeah.
Okay. But you could also translate that into another language. So what's the thing that you're translating? So one of my friends, I mean, he was kind of skeptical of our ability to even detect this because you don't detect it with your five senses. So I have to sort of press you as the skeptic now. You know, why do you rush to believe in this undetectable thing called reasoning? You know, this sort of spooky posit that you're positing, you know, is this a blind faith? Like, what's going on here?
Well, like you said, we all reason. We use these tools. You know, it's the law of non-contradiction is true even if it's Tuesday. These are.
I mean, I said that, so you're just believing me on my authority? I mean,
well, I
what's
think
your evidence?
I would say it's
evidence.
Well, I would say it's a self-evident truth. There are certain truths which are just sort of ground level.
You're starting to sound like a believer, you know, like
a believer in reasoning. Oh yeah, I'm a strong believer in reasoning.
Okay, it's just self-evident. You just have no argument for it, no evidence. You just believe it. It's just obvious. Is that how it is?
Yeah, we could say based on my limited human experience, I've observed that these things occur over and over and over, and that there are, you know, sort of rules to the game of thinking, and that's been my experience. And so you know, even when the person wants to question these rules, they're using the rules. So I see that that's self-defeating. So I think any objection to the use of reasoning, because it uses reasoning, proves that reasoning is true.
Okay. Well, what if somebody said that they're not using reasoning to object to reasoning? They're just using their mouth, saying there is no reasoning. And you appeal to experience, which you're gonna have to forgive me for this.
He's playing a worse doubter than I am. So,
right,
so
okay,
I would say,
your...
well, when they say that, I think I would say, well, you are comprehending what I am communicating to you, and you're thinking how you should respond. So you're following a line of ideological engagement here. You're using a thought process. And so you are trying to communicate. So to me, the consistent one who thinks there is no reasoning is the one who just speaks incoherently all the time.
Yes, I think that you're right that there is a kind of self-defeatingness there. You kind of use reasoning even to try to argue that there is no reasoning. I think fundamentally you actually have more than 5 senses. So I think this is actually one of the problems with limiting your knowledge to only 5 senses. You end up limiting your powers. And one of the senses I think that you have is this inner sense to see within your mind the tracks of reason. And by the way, this is different than the sense by which you see within your mind your own mind. And here's why it's different. I can have the thought that 2 + 2 = 3, and I can have the thought that 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, and I can see within my mind that I just had both those thoughts. Okay, I'm not lying to you. You have to infer that I'm thinking those thoughts based on the pixels you're seeing or whatever the sound you're hearing. But for me, it's more direct. I just see it. And I see it not with my eyes, not with my ears, right? But it's a direct seeing. But here's something that's different between those thoughts. The thought that 2 + 2 = 3 and the thought that 2 + 2 = 4. Don't you have the feeling like those thoughts aren't like on par? There's some important respect in which they're different, right? And well, what is that difference? Well, the difference is that the one thought seems to be true, and the other thought doesn't seem to be true. Now, what's truth? Well, if you think of truth as a matching with reality, the thought that 2 + 2 = 4 matches a reality, okay? And the thought that 2 + 2 = 3 does not. But now we can think about, okay, well, what is that reality that it's matching? It's a kind of abstract, mathematical or logical reality, right? And that abstract logical reality is one of these things that's familiar but not insignificant at all, because it's a reality that you and I both can access from within our minds. But we have to distinguish between accessing something from within our minds versus the thing itself being only in our minds. One of the things that I can see about logic is that logic has a kind of necessity to it. It isn't just that 2 + 2 happens to equal 4 when I'm thinking about it. I see when I see 2 + 2 = 4 that it can't be false. I see that it has that property. I see that property as surely as I see that I have a thought and my thought is about numbers, or I see that you have a shirt and it's black, okay, or at least that I have the experience of you having a shirt and my experience of blackness. See, I can't take anything for granted. As surely as I can see these things, I can see that 2 + 2 = 4 has the property of cannot be false.
Yeah.
And it follows from that, I can follow the line of reason, it follows from that piece of reality, the piece that 2 + 2 = 4 corresponds to, exists even when I'm not thinking about it. Because let me just make sure this is clear. I don't have to think about it, but it does have to be true. And I can see that it has to be true right within my mind.
Yep.
So I tell my students, you've got more than 5 senses. You have the sense, the introspective sense, which is the 6th sense. It's not spooky. It's very familiar. You have a 7th sense by which you can see the logical landscape. You have an 8th sense by which you can see right and wrong. You have a 9th. You've got more senses, okay? And people limit themselves to 5 senses. You can't even see that you have 5 senses with one of your 5 senses.
Yeah.
Okay. It's through the sense of introspection that you even see that you have 5 senses. So anyway, I like to get to the foundations of knowledge because that's where you have the power. And I always tell my students, if you want to have power in life, see things to build your life, get to the foundation.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I think reasoning exists, but here's why I think reasoning exists. You have a sense by which you can see it in your mind. Let
me pause you there. We've got to take a break here, Josh. But certainly this is good going from doubting Tom to back to me. Doubting Tom's been following you thus far, but we haven't gotten to God yet. We've got to take a break here. Hopefully and the second half of the program will get there. So stick with us through this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Let's say there's this Christian apologist. You love their message, but have trouble finding their videos, their articles, or social media posts. How do you stay connected to them? We're on it. Defenders Media uses the tools of the digital age to create content for your favorite apologists. We give them more screen time, more digital soapboxes, and more presence to deliver more of the content that you love. That's what we do.
I know that social media is important to those of you who follow my work. Many respond to my videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter, but it becomes impossible after a while to keep up with it all and to continue with research. That's why I'm thrilled that we have found a solution, Defenders Media.
Whether it's a website, whether it's printed material, whether it's a question on graphics, I cannot do what I do and reach my audience without the help of Defenders Media. They have been integral in helping me to reach my audience.
Defenders Media ensures consistent content reaches your hand from today's leading apologists and apologetic ministries, like Mike Lycona, Apologetics 315, the Veracity Hill Podcast with Kurt Jarris, and more.
To learn more, text the word Defenders to 555-888, and we'll send you a free PDF of the top 5 ways to share the gospel online. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you want to learn how you can become a sponsor, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com, click on that patron tab to learn more. And folks that want to become patrons, those are folks that just want to chip in a few bucks each month, $5, $10, $20. It'd be great to get your recurring support to keep this program going and growing. And so it's such a blessing to bring you new content week after week. Thank you to our supporters for allowing us to do so. And on today's episode, we are joined by Dr. Joshua Rasmussen, an analytic philosopher at Azusa Pacific University, where he is leading Doubting Tom over the bridge to God. Now, Josh, before we get back to our conversation, we do a segment on the show called Rapid Questions. And basically, it's 60 seconds. We're looking for short, quick answers from you about random questions. So he's looking surprised. He's like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
This is good. This is what we want. So again, we're looking for fast answers. So if you're ready, I will start the game clock.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. What song is playing on your radio these days?
None.
What's your favorite movie?
It's a Wonderful Life.
Do you drink Dr. Pepper?
No.
What kind of razor do you use?
Electric.
What's your spouse's favorite holiday?
Christmas.
When's the last time you swam in a pool?
When I was 12.
What color is your bedroom carpet?
Brown. I don't remember. Just kidding.
Do you know all the words in the national anthem?
I probably do, but please don't don't make me sing that.
Do you have any tattoos?
No.
What was the name of your first pet?
Missy, even though we're
Oh, he's slowed down. Oh no.
less than 5 seconds.
Oh, okay, sorry. We're going to give you a few extra seconds here. Have you ever driven on the other side of the road?
Yes, of course. Everybody does that. Oh, you're saying all the questions in 30 seconds, not each. Okay, I got it.
No, I just you.
I thought I had 30 seconds per question.
Oh,
I was
no,
like getting
no,
it as fast as, like, I'm very competitive, so I'm like.
No, that was good.
I'm
You were
beating-
doing well, except your video feed sort of,
So, okay.
what is that term, Chris? You're a technical guy.
Lagged.
It lagged on us. So let me ask you a couple more questions because the time has gone though. This is always a fun one. Where is it here? What's one person? Who is one person you'd like to have dinner with to discuss a topic you disagree on?
My wife, Rachel.
Fascinating. Dang.
And we do that all the time, and it's great, and I love it. She's my favorite person. She's so smart and creative, and
he's like, I just sent myself to the doghouse. Now let me fix it. So what's one thing you guys disagree on?
Well, so we actually had a disagreement over how many kids to have.
Oh,
and
this
we've
is
actually
getting
never
personal.
resolved that.
This is getting personal. And how many kids do you have?
Well, we have 4 now. So, yeah, this is personal. I don't know if we should be talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was done at 3, and she was ready to keep going.
Okay.
So I guess she won that debate.
I guess so. All right, let me ask you something not as personal, but which is more personal to me. You do not drink Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, so I like Pepsi.
Wow, it's not even a health thing.
Coke is good too. But yeah, no, I've been trying to get away from soda altogether.
Oh, I see.
Sure.
Okay. But you'll have a Pepsi,
Yeah.
but not a Dr. Pepper. Got it. All right, I see how it is.
Believe it or not, most carbonated beverages are better than Dr. Pepper.
Wow, Chris, you're fired. All right, we've got a commenter here, Jonathan. He's asking about the A's hat I'm wearing today. He says, is it foreshadowing the grade you're going to get on your dissertation? Well, Jonathan, thank you for tuning in today. Dissertations don't get... Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, since I'm still in the process. It's not like I'm going to get an A or B on the dissertation. It's either pass or fail.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes, but if you wear that hat, it will increase the chances that you'll get a pass if you wear that hat while you're defending the dissertation.
Right.
Subliminal.
Okay. So I'll be sure to take it to Scotland, and wear this A's hat.
Right.
Just subliminal messages to the examiners. Think A's. Think A's. No.
Yeah, don't put pass because that's too explicit. A's. Yeah.
Yes. For those folks that are just joining us now, I am wearing an A's hat. The Cubs are my favorite team. All my Cubs hats are presently dirty. A's are my favorite AL team. Love Moneyball, the concept. They put together year after year competitive team with one of the smallest budgets in MLB baseball, and that's quite admirable. Now, Josh, where are you from originally?
I was born in Michigan,
Michigan.
but my family's in Arizona. We've kind of moved around a little bit. So.
Are you a baseball fan?
I probably should be, but to have rapport with you in this conversation.
Quite all right.
I don't know what to say about that.
Quite all right. All right, getting back to the topic of today's show, reasoning toward God. In the first half of the program, we touched on that first stage where, as doubting Tom, look, we do have existence, we've got reasoning, we have these foundational truths that we kind of all agree on, and it's not even that we merely agree on them, but we all operate in this way. Even the skeptic, the non-believer uses, reasoning exists, and so they can't not use these things. So in our pursuit of truth, though, stage 1 doesn't get us to God, much less the Christian God, Josh. So we talked about reasoning. What about these effects? Or did we cover everything on reasoning?
Yeah, so let me just sort of complete this kind of argument here. So there's an argument from effects. You look at the things we observe, and then we trace back the nature of the cause. And we can think about this scientifically. So in science, we'll have a hypothesis, and we'll see, okay, what does the hypothesis predict, and does it successfully make its predictions? This is how you form ordinary beliefs. You walk outside, you see things are wet, that's what you observe. And you think, okay, here's a hypothesis, it rained last night, and that would predict this. And so the wetness is evidence for the hypothesis that predicts it. Now, notice that we don't say, well, maybe instead of it raining last night, what it was that there was a bird that put some water over here, and then some alien space, ships put some water over here, and then some sprinklers.
Well, there's the sprinkler. I was going to say, yeah.
Complicated, right? So we're looking for the simplest explanation that predicts the data. And so it's not a proof here, but it's a reason. And so I would want to just kind of start by pointing out how reasoning itself, so before the break, you mentioned that you're a believer in reasoning, you think it exists. And we talked about how reasoning is a way of tracking what I like to call the logical landscape, which transcends your own mind and has a nature that is firm, it's robust. And so what explains that? What would predict the reality of reasoning? Well, here's a simple hypothesis. Okay, so in the first stage of the argument, we got to kind of ultimate foundation. It exists in a robust way, doesn't depend on other things, and it explains how there can be anything. And a simple account of the nature of the foundation is that it's supreme. Okay, that's a theory simple account, so it's a hypothesis. And what would a supreme nature predict? Well, here are some predictions that we can tease out by reason itself. If it's supreme, it's going to have a supreme grip on existence, so it cannot fail to exist, just like logic. Also, it's going to have supreme powers, including the power of supreme thinking. And you might even think that logic itself reflects supreme thinking. So remember, the logical landscape is something that transcends your thinking. It's a kind of perfect thinking. Well, this is exactly what we would predict. We would expect from a perfect supreme foundation. And so this is, again, this here is not a proof. This is just a reason that points back to a supreme foundation which successfully predicts not only the logical landscape, because that's perfect thinking or perfect reasoning, but it also predicts the powers to produce beings like us that could then discover the logical landscape. So there's a logical landscape, and then there's the reasoning faculties. And it's a hard problem to see how you can get a reality in which beings are able to reason and think. That's not a trivial problem at all. There's a lot of requirements that have to be set up. Well, if you have, just like with the rain hypothesis, if you have rain, that predicts that you're going to see wet. Similarly, if you have a supreme foundation, that's going to predict that you have the resources to produce beings that can see reasoning.
So maybe the foundation of reasoning is something like Plato's forms. They just sort of exist out there. There's this objectivity to them.
I think that's in the direction of truth. And I just want to add to that these forms are rooted in the nature of a powerful foundation. What's the advantage of adding power to the foundation? It allows the foundation to have the resources to not only predict that there is this logical landscape, but it predicts another thing. It also predicts that there's the powers and resources to produce beings and a reason to produce beings that could discover the logical landscape. So Plato's forms, they don't have causal powers. So they don't have the power to then produce or explain why reality unfolds in this direction. It's a bit like if you have a hypothesis that it rained, and you see that this explains not just the wet on a leaf over here, but it also explains the wet on this grass over here. So you have two different observations. And the rain is a simple hypothesis that explains them both. The same way, if you can have a simple hypothesis of a supreme foundation that it can explain many different aspects of reality. We just talked about reasoning, but there are many other effects that we could look into. And so that would give you more and more reasons that all point back to the advantage of this single, simple supreme foundation. So this is just a start, just a beginning, just an introduction, an invitation for further exploration.
So, all right. So I'm following along this far. I presently, maybe I'm a bad doubting Tom, but I can only think of so many objections to this supreme foundation for reasoning itself. But that doesn't get us to God yet, does it?
So if you think about, what does God mean? And I like to start with letting kind of reason reveal the nature of the foundation and uncovering the attributes that are there, rather than we talked about this earlier, starting with the preconception of God, because I actually feel like a lot of obstacles to God are based on a sort of limited or wrong characterization of God. Some people think of God as just like a sky daddy or like a big human, with more powers or something. And then they have reasons to be skeptical, and I think rightly so. But I think of God as, by definition, that which none greater can be conceived, which is what I mean by supreme. And so supreme points to a kind of being, a quality of being that cannot be improved upon, we could say. And it's this kind of thing that then predicts that it's going to have supreme powers, including the power of supreme thinking. It's going to have a supreme nature, including a logical nature, a logical landscape within its nature. It's going to have the supreme resources to produce beings like us. It's going to have within it a supreme moral standard, because it would be a better being, it'd be more supreme if it had a perfect moral standard within its nature than if it were limited in some respect morally. But if it has that moral standard, then it's going to be able to see reasons to produce an interesting world, because that's good. Produce beings like us, right? So that will give it powers, they'll give it resources, and so that's really what I mean by God is a supreme foundation. And I think reason then unpacks what attributes would follow from supreme, and that's how you can then begin to test the quality of the hypothesis.
So at this point, I would say, well, that's just your theory about God.
Yeah, rain is just a theory, maybe it just rained last night.
It sounds coherent, but, there's no evidence for God. I mean, there's no proof, there's no hard evidence.
Yeah, so this takes us back to, what's your evidence for reasoning itself, right? You sort of see reasoning within your mind. And in the same way, what I like to do is point in this path, the path that we follow here, to certain effects that we see. And so just like in science, there are theories that we don't see, like biological evolution or the nature of the stars or electrons, for example. We don't see those theories, but those theories best explain and predict what we do see. And that's a form of evidence. And so what you see in your own mind is reasoning. And what you see is that there's a difference between good reasoning and bad reasoning. There's a difference between perfect reasoning and imperfect reasoning. And so these are things that you see, and those are the very things that are then predicted by this hypothesis. So again, I mean, this is just the beginning. It's not to say there aren't objections and further barriers to think through, but it's just the beginning of a longer conversation.
Right. So, and I know we've only got maybe about 8 minutes or so here left. So let me ask you. So for the skeptic, you would say I've reversed my hat now, forward facing. So for the skeptic, you'd say if they came back to you and said, "Well, there's no hard evidence for God's existence," you would say, "Well, let's be consistent here. If you've already granted that there's reasoning, then you need to have reasoning itself." Serves as another sense
kind of evidence,
as a kind of evidence. So this is certainly a valid form of evidence. Maybe we can call it a soft evidence or something like that. But it's just as, if not more powerful than the hard evidences in certainly many cases. So in this case, it leads us to this supreme being.
Well, and one question is, what do you mean by evidence? Because I think sometimes people will have a limited view of evidence, going back to the five senses. But then on that evidence, you can't even know that there is reasoning.
Right.
So that's why I think it is helpful to start with, just to be honest, what is reasoning? Like, do you really think there is reasoning? And even kind of press somebody to think about, like, what is their evidence for the existence of their own reasoning? And I think pretty quickly you'll get somebody to realize that you can't just appeal to your five senses. You have to go a sense beyond that, something more internal that you see.
I know we've only sort of hit, like you said, the beginning, but we did sort of already get to that supreme being through reasoning. Didn't quite have enough time to talk about the effects. I don't know if you sort of wanted to give us a quick segment on the effects aspect to the stage.
Yeah, well, I mean, just pointing to some of the different effects that we see in the world. So we see that there's a moral sensation. Like, we have the sense that something's wrong. And people can debate whether that sense tracks an objective moral landscape, but even the sense itself is significant. We could imagine a world with machines, and maybe those machines, some of them produce consciousness, like hot or cold, but why do they also produce the feeling that something's gone wrong or something's gone right? And you might say, well, that somehow contributes to its survival. But we have all sorts of evolutionary software programs that generate surviving, self-replicating beings that have no sense of anything. They're just shapes on shapes, and they have structures. And so we have the sense of right and wrong. We have sense itself. There's reasoning. There's a kind of biological complexity. There's self-repairing technologies. If I poke my skin here, it hurts just a little bit. I just damaged some cells.
Yeah.
And they're working now to repair. They're just self-repairing. I had a dream one time that there was this conveyor belt with new technologies of laptops that could just repair themselves. You drop it on the floor.
It's coming.
Not repair the
That's
software, but the
coming. Don't
hardware.
worry.
Yeah, it's coming, but it takes a lot of thinking, right, to even produce the initial conditions
Yeah.
for
We're so
anything like
we're
that.
so impressed with like machinery and robots. Hey, look, we've made a walking robot. Yeah. I mean, it's like, and here we are, just casually strolling about. We're so impressed with our own, inventions.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of fine tuning of the fabric of the universe itself for there to even be places. Because on many theories of the universe, there's places never form, right? And then let alone places in which some sort of evolution can begin. That takes exquisite fine tuning. And so we're back to understanding what best explains that. So that's the argument from effects, and we could look at each of the effects. In the book, I talk about the cause being a foundation of mind, foundation of matter, foundation of morals, foundation of reasoning. So I focus on those. But then there's just the conceptual analysis, and just very, very quickly, you can think of this as a way of simplifying. Sometimes skeptics talk about Occam's razor. We want to razor off unnecessary complexity. And I love that because I think that's right. That points us to truth. The simplest theory that explains the data. So we can razor off the unnecessary complexity of arbitrary boundaries, arbitrary particularities, limits. If the foundation had the power to produce 10 particles and no additional power, then the description of the foundation would be more complex than if it were simply supreme. Richard Swinburne, Oxford philosopher, he talks about this sort of simplest account of the foundation being a supreme nature. And if instead you have these arbitrary limits, then those limits will call out for further explanation. What sets the limits? The problem is, this is the conceptual analysis. We're talking about the foundation. So there's no deeper explanation of its nature because it's the foundation of all natures. So there can't be a deeper explanation, but all limits have a deeper explanation. Therefore, the foundation can't have limits. So there's an argument that it has to be simple and purely unlimited with respect to its basic attributes. How could that be? If it's supreme, that's exactly how it could be.
Yeah, nice.
And I think that conceptual analysis is one of the most powerful arguments. When you really get it, when you think about that and it clicks, I think that really can give you sight. It's more than just a guess. It's more than just even an inference to the best explanation. I think you can see it has to be supreme.
J.P. Moreland calls your argument well developed with such precision and care that, quite frankly, it could not be improved upon. So this is How Reason Can Lead to God, A Philosopher's Bridge to Faith, by our guest today, Dr. Joshua Rasmussen, available now. We'll put a link at our website as well for folks to purchase that. Now, before we let you go, Josh, I did want to touch base here on our little exchange on precepts. So when I was promoting the show, I said, precepts beware, natural theology arguments ensnare, which for the precept, they don't think natural theology arguments ensnare. They think belief in God is sort of a default position, actually, right? No true atheists. And so really it's the will of man that's broken. So there's not really any arguments you can give someone from natural theology, they say. Now you said I'm kind even to precepts because there are many paths to knowledge. Some paths take a single step. Other paths, for those who like an adventure, have many steps. Some bridges are shorter than others. But you would say here, so the precept says that the long bridge is pointless. Don't even bother. But you say it's worth it for the skeptic.
Yeah, there are different kinds of precepts that I've met. And so I think there's a kind of variety there, right? But I find it sort of odd if there is a way to know God through one step, like why would it be impossible to know God through more than one step? Like why couldn't there be other things that God could let us know in various ways? To put it in kind of a certain precept-friendly terms, you could even think that God himself is enabling you to have knowledge of certain effects.
Yeah.
And then giving you knowledge that God is the best explanation of those effects, or the only possible explanation of those effects.
Yeah.
Maybe those bits of knowledge are illuminated by God's Spirit in some kind of way. We tend to think of reason as a kind of natural human thing, but I would actually argue it's a spiritual thing. And reason itself, true reason, true logic, is rooted in God's nature. So, yeah, I think there's many paths, and I think for myself, when I was a skeptic, I remember what it was like to think I don't believe that God exists, and I don't know how to have that belief. There's like nothing I can do to just like oh, I just want to believe, therefore I can sort of find a way, right? It just, I want there to be a gold bar right now in my hands, but I just don't believe there is one. So,
Yeah.
so for me, I mean, I have to be very honest with you, is that this bridge of reason was the type of argument that helped me to, I would say, come to know that God is real, and through these steps. So yeah, I like to be inclusive. I think, the precepts, we can be friends. It's like, yeah, I can acknowledge that there are one-step paths to knowledge, and there are many steps paths to knowledge.
Yeah,
many
I would totally
steps.
agree. And I would disagree with the precept on the more exclusive approach that they have. And I think, as we've been talking here, I think it is rooted, our differences are rooted in theological anthropology. So while they say it's a lot about philosophy, different philosophical differences, I think ultimately for the precept it's a different view of total depravity. Because even Reformed, I'm writing a paper for a book on this, the Reformed camps have different views. I mean, the classical approach, B.B. Warfield and the Princeton camp says, yeah, natural theology arguments are good and useful. Whereas the Amsterdam neo-Calvinist Kuyperian folks, and of course then Van Til's thought, basically says, no, natural theology is useless, functionally useless, except for the believer. So, yeah, so even they're torn, the Reformed are torn on that. So, all right, well, hey, we got to close up shop here, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, and keep me posted about all the different happenings that you've got going on. For those that want to learn more, we'll put a link to his website at ours, and you were telling me about your YouTube channel as well, if I can mention that, Worldview Design. These great little, you've got some animated videos here for folks that want to check out more. Just go to youtube.com and search for Worldview Design right there at the top. Great content. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
Well, that does it for our program today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons and the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. And they are Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Fox Restoration. I want to thank our technical producer, Chris, for all the fine work that he does, and to our guest, Dr. Joshua Rasmussen over at Azusa Pacific University. Super smart guy. Glad he can come on our program today. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.